You?
We do.
Oh, there's Tori. Hey, Tori.
Hey, I can't stand the whole time, but I thought I would at least join for the first bit.
Fun. All right.
Tori, good to see you.
Good seeing you.
I have a question. On the last meeting, there was a gentleman, John Barry, who was speaking. How do you spell his last name? I just wanted to send that to my scopist. Does anyone know?
I do not know the answer.
I do. It's Barre.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like my former hometown.
Trying to figure out how I can see the residents on here.
I'm sorry, I've got a correction. Barree. 2 R's, 2 E's.
All right, not like my former hometown.
Thank you.
Oh, Clonella's on. Can we let Clonella in as a panelist?
Yes, we'll allow her right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Clonella, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, so it looks like so far we've got 14 participants beyond the Housing Authority and ourselves. I want to give it just a couple more minutes for folks trying to log on, but you are in the right place if you're here for the resident meeting for Hoboken Housing Authority. And we'll do introductions shortly. So it does look like that everybody that joined should be able to see the PowerPoint. They joined via Zoom as opposed to dialing in. So another technical question, are the panelists all muted, and at some point when we have questions, we'll unmute? Is that how that's going to work, Lourdes?
Yes, I guess when they're ready, when you're ready to take questions, we're gonna allow one at a time.
Okay, perfect. All right, Mark, so in another minute, we'll get started.
Sounds good.
All right, we're holding steady at 15 participants. Okay, so Jessica, good idea. So folks, for just a technical explanation of how
Oh,
this is.
Excuse me,
Oh.
are we starting? Mark, do you want to officially announce when we're starting? I don't know when you want to begin or you want to give direction.
Okay, Terry, I think now's a great time to say we're officially starting.
Okay.
I'm
All
just
right.
looking at the comment section, Mark, and someone says, just to remind folks that if you want to say something in the chat box, you can do that during the presentation.
Yeah. And I
All
see
right, I'm ready.
Excuse me for
someone's
one second.
asking,
This is the core reporter. I'm just want to sign out of my real time and just come back in. For some reason, my real time just failed me. So just give me one moment, please.
Okay.
Sure.
Just 1 minute.
Christina, one thing that I'm going to ask from you is at some point, I'll be playing the video. And the last time that I did that, I was not on my headset, but I was on my speakers. And I'm not sure if that impacts everybody's ability to hear it. So when I start playing it, just let me know if everybody can hear it, or anybody can let me know, but just wanted to put that out there
Okay,
in
yep,
case I have to switch settings or something.
thanks.
Oh, we've gained a participant.
Just 1 moment. I'm so sorry about this.
It's all right. And we are recording this, correct?
correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good to go. Sorry about that.
All right.
Quite all right.
Thank you, Terry. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Mark Recco. I'm the Executive Director of the Hoboken Housing Authority. And this is a resident meeting to make sure that everyone knows where we are. And I think it's going to be a great informative session for everyone that's been with us since our initial meetings in the summer and our meetings through the end of summer and into fall with residents, with stakeholders. Our plan is coming together. We're in the final process of the last couple months of pulling the plan together. And tonight we want to come to you with a presentation that really will educate everybody in our community about the different options that the Housing Authority has as it goes into public housing repositioning, redevelopment. We want to make sure that everyone understands as we go through this process the great opportunities the Housing Authority has out there, and the built-in protections for residents, all of the aspects as we go through this process and this journey really over the next few years together. It's a journey that, as we've said so often, is just crucial. We know that the Housing Authority needs that kind of financial input to rehabilitate, redevelop our properties, that we really need to do something to really fix our issues. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am of all of the input that we've gotten from resident groups, resident advisory boards, individuals that have called us. As we've gone through this, we've really valued the input from all the groups throughout Hoboken, throughout Hudson County, and really throughout the state and country. So tonight we've got a great group to give you a presentation first. We will be fielding questions at the end, but Miss Shannon Leston is going to take us through and give us a presentation on all of the all of the great options that the Housing Authority has, and kind of the protections and the things that different funding options mean to us. So we want everyone on this call to know those things. Tonight, we've got folks that are from the Enterprise Partners Group. They are a group that was hired, that is hired and reports directly to HUD. They're not hired by the Housing Authority. They're hired by HUD to kind of help us through the process, and yes, look over us to make sure that we're staying within HUD guidelines and that we're on the right track. We also have folks here from Cordy Gallus Partners, who are the planning team that are partnering with us. And then we also have HHA staff here to make sure that we can answer any questions and give you a real feel for where we are and what we're doing and what our possibilities are. So having said that, oh yeah, and then at the end of the meeting, I am going to show you a resident survey that we're publishing. That survey will be open to you starting tomorrow. So I can give you a look at the resident survey and what we've got coming to you. Please, as you see that and as we publish it, take a look at that survey, because that's going to be a great part of the input coming from you as residents into the Housing Authority. So having said that, Shannon, I'm going to hand it on over to you and let you get started with your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. We also have Clonella Richardson. I almost forgot Clonella. Clonella Richardson is directly from HUD. She's with us tonight. Hello, Clonella. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon Leston, and I will be leading you through quite a few slides this evening and presentation. So if you have any concerns of any kind, feel free to use the chat bar or the Q&A feature of the Zoom presentation, and hopefully maybe Christina or Lourdes can monitor that while I'm giving the presentation. That'd be great. So I don't want to waste any more time. So tonight we are going to go through, as Mark said, really some educational pieces of what it is that Hoboken Housing Authority has been up to and hopefully will be up to over the next several years. And this is really our objectives for tonight. I want to make sure I have this in writing. So we're going to give you a little bit of training about what repositioning means. We're going to hear from HUD's Office of Recap about some PHAs who have successfully repositioned their properties already. Really what we want to get across to you, a major point, is that Hoboken is not alone in its efforts to redevelop and put your properties in a better position. It's something that lots and lots of housing authorities all across the country are doing. And so there's folks who have gone before you, lessons learned, so you are not alone. One of the big pieces of tonight's presentation is to talk to you about resident rights and participation for each of the options that are available, to give you some additional resources if you want to go ahead and do some research on your own. Hear your concerns and questions. That'll be at the end. Right now, I believe everybody is muted except for myself and my team. And then at the end, we're just going to talk about some best ways to start establishing trust between the Housing Authority residents, the staff, and the board of directors. Okay, so just very broad overview of why we are here and what we're up to. And it basically comes down to, and I can see some comments in the chat box, that Hoboken and a lot of other housing authorities all across the country are struggling to physically maintain the quality of their buildings. And that has to do with the type of funding that comes through in the public housing program. It has been very much underfunded for a very long time, and most of the public housing properties, some of them go back as much as 50 years old. So it's a very, very old stock of housing. And again, it's been underfunded, and they estimated back in 2010 that across the country there was about $36 billion worth of capital needs that these public housing properties needed. And if you ask me and most other folks, that's probably very understated. So in response to that, since 2011, HUD has put together some tools for public housing authorities to try and address the significant problems that they're facing. And so HUD and Enterprise, that's who we are working with, we're going to walk through these options with you and explain why redeveloping Hoboken's portfolio will be different from the Duncan project. And the reason I bring up the Duncan project right here at the beginning is that we met with the resident advisory board, oh gosh, back in November, maybe December. And one of the things that they wanted to understand was, why is this going to be any different from what happened at the Duncan projects? And so I did spend some time researching that so that I could best explain to you what those differences are, so that folks aren't worried. Okay. So when we talk about repositioning public housing, what does that mean? It is simply stated, it would mean that we're taking a unit or an apartment that receives federal public housing subsidy and converting it to what we call Section 8 subsidy. And the word subsidy is key here, and I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit more detail in some future slides so that you understand the difference between public housing subsidy and Section 8 subsidy. And the goal here by switching the funding subsidy is to preserve the housing, public housing, for the long term. And we can do that either what we call a project-based unit or a voucher. And repositioning is also known as conversion. So I will use those terms interchangeably, repositioning and conversion. So for you to understand, or for me to explain why this is really important to switch those subsidies, we need to understand a little bit about how they currently operate. So public housing was established back in 1937, which is why some of the projects are like 50 years old. And it was established to provide decent and safe, affordable housing to low-income families. Originally, there were 970,000 units of public housing throughout the country, administered by 3,300 public housing authorities. That's a lot of public housing. And the way public housing is currently funded and supported are through two main funding streams. The first one is called the Public Housing Operating Fund. It is a form of subsidy, and it is intended to cover the gap between what the residents, what you guys pay, which is generally 30% of your income, and what it actually costs to operate the property. Such as heating, electricity, paying the staff, those types of costs. The second form of funding or subsidy is called Public Housing Capital Fund. And that money is used specifically for renovations of the properties and to replace what we call capital items. For instance, your refrigerators, your windows, anything that gets broken needs to be fixed. That all comes from the capital fund. And HUD awards every housing authority those forms of subsidy every year. And that subsidy can go up and down in any given year. We don't know what it's going to do. Historically, as we've said before, it has been going, for years and years it had gone down consistently. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to, hang on. I wanted to scroll, not, oops. So both streams of subsidy, as I've said, are deeply underfunded. And so since 2000, and since the year 2000, all but 3 years of that funding have been subject to cuts. There hasn't been any additional public housing added since the mid 1990s. And 200,000 units have been lost from the public housing portfolio since the mid 1990s. And I just wanted to point out here, when I looked up the Duncan projects, that was originally a 664 unit property. And because of the physical deterioration, the lack of funding in public housing, by the time that that project was redeveloped, it had lost already 200 units. So that's pretty significant. And so what we're attempting to do here at Hoboken is to keep that from happening. So in public housing, once HUD and the Housing Authority sign a contract with each other, there is what we call a declaration of trust placed on the property, which restricts the use of it to low-income housing. But the part, even though that sounds like a great idea, what that does, that DOT actually indirectly restricts, in a lot of ways, the Public Housing Authority or HHA from placing any debt on the property. And as we'll talk about, debt is one of the ways that Hoboken is hoping to raise some capital to do some much needed repairs or new construction for the Hoboken Housing Authority. So we just talked about public housing, and now we're going to talk about Section 8. Remember, we're going to go from public housing to Section 8. So Section 8 wasn't created until 1974, believe it or not. And it's what we call a deep subsidy program, meaning that the public housing program was targeted at folks that we call low income residents, below 80% of the area median income. Section 8 is actually a deep subsidy program. It actually targets folks at extremely low or low income levels. And what HUD does is they establish a contract rent. In public housing, there's no such thing as a contract rent. But in Section 8, HUD decides on a contract rent for the unit, and they pay a subsidy that is the difference between that contract rent and what you, the resident, can pay, 30% of your income. So originally there were 2 forms of Section 8. The first one is known as the Housing Choice Voucher Program, HCV for short. You're going to realize that in affordable housing world, there's a lot of terms that are going to be unfamiliar. I'll try and do my best to explain them. A lot of acronyms that come up over and over again. So Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that is a tenant-based subsidy, which means that the subsidy moves around with the resident. So if the resident decides that they're going to leave one unit and move across town to another unit, the subsidy actually goes with them. Currently, Hoboken operates about 225 housing choice vouchers. The other type of Section 8 is what we call the Project-Based Rental Assistance Program, PBRA. That type of subsidy is actually attached to the unit and doesn't move with the resident. So in a project-based unit, the person comes in to apply for assistance and live in a unit. If they're accepted, they receive that subsidy as long as they're living in that unit. When they move, the subsidy doesn't go with them. It stays at the unit, and the next person who moves in benefits from it. Then in 1998, HUD created what we call the Project-Based Voucher Program, PBVs for short. Now you're going to hear that a lot because that is the direction that Hoboken Housing Authority is headed in for their Section 8 program, switching from public housing to PBVs. So it is a combination of a project-based program and a tenant-based program, best of both worlds. So the way that works is a resident applies for housing, they move into the unit, and for the first 12 months, the subsidy is attached to the unit. After the resident has been living there for 12 months, if they would like to move somewhere else, they can apply to the Section 8 department for an HCV, a housing choice voucher, which is mobile. Their name goes to the top of the wait list, and then once a voucher becomes available, then that resident, if they qualify, can take that next housing choice voucher and move elsewhere, and the subsidy continues to stay with the unit so that when the next person moves in, they are also subsidized. So it's a really great program. And right now that's what's going on at Fox Hill. So Fox Hill, as you may or may not know, already converted to Section 8 subsidy to project-based vouchers. So there's about 200 project-based vouchers in the Hoboken portfolio. So why are we repositioning? Why should Hoboken consider repositioning its public housing? Well, first of all, it's going to place the properties under much less restrictive requirements and allow Hoboken to access debt and what we call low-income housing tax credits, which is a form of equity, so that they can finance the substantial rehabilitation and or demolition and new construction of units. It allows Hoboken to retain full control of the properties instead of HUD. It allows Hoboken to preserve the properties with project-based assistance. And when we say preserve, that means take care of the buildings physically for the long term. So Hoboken and HUD are going to enter into a long-term renewable housing assistance contract under Section 8. It is not a funding formula, so Hoboken will know exactly every year what they're getting for funding. It's not subject to going up and down. And this really stabilizes the project and is really critical in order to secure new debt to do the renovations. The annual rent adjustments make sure that the rental revenue goes up every year. Again, it does not subject to going down. And the cash flow that Hoboken receives is actually unrestricted. It actually encourages managing efficiently, and that extra money can go back into things like resident services or providing additional housing for the Hoboken community. So this is a great visual of the difference between the way public housing works and Section 8 works. So on the left-hand side, this is how things are running right now at Hoboken. So you, the resident, and this is just an example, you, the resident, 30% of your income is $318. So every month you pay the housing authority $318. Then the subsidy that Hoboken gets from the federal government, their operating fund is $330 a month, and the capital fund is $144. These are not real numbers, by the way. That's how it works. So let's say next month for your unit, Hoboken gets $792. But what happens next year when Congress appropriates funds and they decide that they're going to reduce the amount of subsidy that Hoboken gets? For the operating fund goes down to $130. So that means Hoboken has less money to operate the properties. Or what happens if the capital funds go down? which means they have less money to do repairs. There's nothing they can do about that. What happens if you, the resident, loses your job and you can't pay $318 anymore? Well, Hoboken has to figure out how to take care of the same property that's getting old with less money. And that is why we're in the situation that we are currently. So when we switch over to Section 8, remember we talked about HUD establishes a contract rent. So they say to Hoboken, okay, we're going to establish your contract rent for that unit at $792. And your subsidy is going to be based on, remember, what the tenant can pay and the difference between what the tenant can pay and what the contract rent is. So for that unit, your subsidy for next month is going to be $474. So you'll get the same amount. However, that subsidy can never go down. Remember, we've locked into a long-term Section 8 contract. Hoboken knows that every year they're going to get $474 at least for that unit for subsidy. And if you, the resident, loses your job and you can't pay $318 anymore, then HUD will pay the full $792 for that unit, making the housing authority whole. So I'm hoping that illustrates a little bit of how the two different subsidies work. One of them fluctuates up and down, and the other one stays constant. And having that constant rent, $792, is key for the housing authority to be able to leverage debt and to do those repairs. I have to take a sip of water, sorry. Okay, so what have other public housing authorities? I said that a lot of housing authorities all over the country have done this and are in the process of doing it. So they've been able to modernize their aging properties, stabilize their revenue. They've done substantial rehabilitation on some of their properties. They've demolished and redeveloped their distressed and obsolete properties. They've been able to move some of their residents to areas of higher opportunity or thin densities and mixed incomes, streamline their operations, making it much easier to follow all the rules in essence. And right now, under the RAD program, which is what we're going to talk about, more than 156,000 units have already converted. So what do you guys get out of this? What do the residents get? Well, you get much better physical conditions, either a substantially renovated unit or a new unit to live in. You know that your assistance is going to be guaranteed for the long term. And you have that flexibility after 12 months of living there to request a mobile voucher to potentially move somewhere else. So what are Hoboken's available options for switching to Section 8? Another diagram. I'm a very visual person, so this helps. Okay, so right now there are 3 options available for Hoboken. The first one is called the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, and we're going to talk about these options later in the presentation. So under RAD, the Housing Authority can either convert to Section 8 project-based rental assistance, we talked about that earlier, PBRA, or to Section 8 project-based vouchers, PBVs. Under the one on the far right is Section 18 demolition disposition. And that one provides the opportunity to do Section 8 project-based vouchers or Section 8 mobile vouchers. And then there's something in between called the RAD Section 18 blend, which is a combination of the two. Most times when that is done, we see those done as Section 8 project-based vouchers. All right, so here is a video that I'm going to show you. It's short, but I think it really demonstrates or might inspire some of you residents to hear from other residents or from other housing authorities who have gone through the rental assistance demonstration program, which is what the housing authority is contemplating here. And so hopefully, technically, Christina, let me know if this works. I'm gonna have to bring my screen over here. Hang on 2 seconds. Let's see. This one. I'm like, which one is it? I'm gonna, can you hear that? Can you hear it? No.
No,
All right.
possibly really quietly.
I'm gonna
think-
change my my sound to not my headset, and I think that will help. So hang on 2 seconds. And actually take me off of video while I do this, because okay, I'm gonna try it again and see what happens.
Hello, I'm Greg Byrne, and I oversee transactions for the Office of Recapitalization here at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We know that a lot of public housing agencies are interested in converting their public housing to Section 8, or what we also refer to as repositioning. Some of those agencies are doing it because of the potential for streamlining and more local control. Others see the Section 8 program as a more stable funding platform. And then likely for the majority of agencies, the major benefit of the Section 8 program is the much greater ability to leverage debt and equity to address the mounting capital needs in public housing, and thereby better preserving these public housing assets for the long term. Given this interest, we've been working to make sure that housing authorities, their boards, and residents understand the benefits that repositioning can bring and the options that are available to them, whether that's through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, or RAD, the Section 18 Demolition Disposition Program, or through streamlined voluntary conversion. We also thought it would be helpful if you could hear from some housing authority staff and board members regarding their experiences with repositioning. Just like you, these housing professionals and local leaders are weighing how best to serve the low-income housing needs in their communities. Let's see what they have to say.
I was a member of the Macomb County Housing Authority. And during that time, we're in a troubled agency. We owed lots of money.
Lancaster Park used to be a 40-unit development, but because of issues they had in the past, they actually had to demolish 10 before I got here.
And the apartments that we had there were just dilapidated. Air conditioning units were falling out windows.
We saw the decline in not only the capital money that we were getting, which takes care of modernization, construction, and those types of things, but also a decline in the operating money. What are we going to do?
How can I solve that? How can I address those large capital needs when I'm only getting a fraction of what I need to do it?
There is a period here where construction costs just ballooned on the entire industry.
So it's an impossible situation.
We had to come to a realization that we needed to take these public housing communities and put them on a different platform. So it was a fairly easy decision to decide that we were going to reposition the entire portfolio, either using RAD or the RAD blend, so that we can make sure that these communities were viable and sustainable for the future. And as you can see, they're turning out beautiful.
We combined a lot of the different platforms in one. It gets a little bit more complicated We looked at all the financial tools to see which one was the best tool for this particular agency.
And so it's really a philosophical decision that you're going to make about the care of the asset. And so when we reposition, it means physically, financially, economically, and sustainably.
We've been working to provide as many tools as possible to allow housing authorities to convert their public housing to Section 8. And those tools include the rental assistance demonstration program, the Section 18 demolition disposition program, streamlined voluntary conversion, and even for those who want to do homeownership, there's something called Section 32 homeownership, where as the units are sold, the residents, the housing authority gets tenant protection vouchers for every unit that gets sold.
We're going to own it and we're going to still manage it. So we'll probably do a 4% tax credit deal and totally do a rehab on them and create a new face to the community.
These two properties were redeveloped using the rental assistance demonstration. They were also done with a development partner.
We said we would be agreeable to transfer ownership from the housing authority to CHP because, again, we didn't have any tax credit competency, but it was important that we brought this new housing asset. And quite frankly, having a new housing asset in Hopewell really trumped the ownership question.
If repositioning the asset is the key to moving forward to making better communities in this country, I think that's the future that we've got to do. We've got to do it.
We'll give you vouchers and place you somewhere else until these projects are built. And then when they're built, you can move back.
So I was ready for the change. Once I got the word, I said, look, I'm packed and ready, and we went through it.
It's amazing to see the end results of some of the work that was done at some of these properties because under the old Section 9 platform, of course, you could only do minor things, right? So we were able to really upgrade these properties.
We were able to do demolition on some of the property while a part of the property continued to stand.
It was good for me, and with the kids, it was good for the kids too as well, because they still got to go to their same school, see their friends and everything, so nothing really changed.
Well, this original site consisted of 20 buildings, a total of 100 units, and they were fairly antiquated and blighted federal housing units. Phase 1 consisted of the demolition and replacement of 50 public housing units to 50 RAD units. And on top of that, we added another 32 tax credit units into the mix.
We will be replacing flooring, appliances,
new bathrooms,
cabinetry,
new roofs. We did new heating systems.
We took great pride in establishing the exterior finishes with stone, the multicolored siding.
These are going to be basically new apartments.
Anyone can move into these buildings and you cannot tell that these are public housing properties.
We really wanted to do so with the guidance and partnership of a developer partner who had kind of been there and done that.
If you're going to do this, you need the best development attorney you can find. And that person will largely solve most of your problems.
I would probably spend a year just kind of talking to the political leaders and other people in the city just to talk about, what's available.
As housing authorities realize that we're going to be making these moves and we're going to be moving forward in this direction, there had to be some sit-down conversations with our housing finance agency to say, here's our needs.
I mean, you got to weigh the dynamics of how it's going to impact you with your staffing, finance-wise. You create a really good product, but you don't end up owning it like you do with your federal housing needs. That's always been a concern in this whole mix of what do you do with your staff.
That's a big deal. What do you do with the employees once you reposition?
If all of a sudden you're not a public housing agency per se.
So that was a very big issue, but this was about us preserving affordable housing in Baltimore. And we had to be able to face those things head on.
Now, a lot of agencies have stepped on board with voluntary conversion, which seems to be a little bit more of an appealing approach and mixing the RAD and the voluntary conversion to blend the finances to make it work better for them. But for us, it worked.
We could preside over a decaying housing inventory and leave things the way they were. Or we could say this housing has outlived its useful life. That's the reality. And so redevelopment became the tool of choice.
Yeah, a lot of people step back and say, wow, this does make a difference. Can it work? Will it work? Well, 2 years later, we have proof in the pudding. It's working. Obviously, we want to stay in business for a very long time. We decided that the entire public housing portfolio was going to go through the repositioning.
We didn't have any experience. Do we have time to wait to develop the competency? Or is there a different way for us to gain the competency?
The first project went through demolition disposition, and then the second project went through full RAD alone. The third project is going now through HUD's newest product, which is RAD Section 18 combination. So here at Mead Village, a lot of what we've been doing is basically a full restoration or rehabilitation of the existing units. So these units that you see behind me range anywhere from 2 to 6 bedrooms, and we're largely going from top to bottom. We're handling interior kitchens, appliances, a lot of the energy upgrades that you see going on with things like HVAC, new roofs, new color schemes, new siding to bring them up to the 2020 standards so that they can be better marketed, they can be far more comfortable for the people who live here, and they'll be highly competitive in the marketplace. Process total from demolition to new completion was 14 months.
This housing stock is such that it needs to be replaced. But the choice was for us to gain capacity by going to school, by hiring individual community revitalization staff, or just learning more about community revitalization and taking that on as a competency. But we needed to convince some people who were going to have to fund that we were competent. We said, we're going to purchase the competency.
One of the greatest advantages of repositioning is it allows a housing authority to plan for their properties for the long term, which is just very difficult in the public housing program, where the funding sort of goes up and down in any particular year. Whereas in Section 8, you have a long-term housing assistance payment contract with built-in adjustments for inflation. But even bigger than that is that the Section 8 program allows you to go and sit down with a lender and have a conversation and say, I'd like to go out and refinance and take care of these capital needs through some type of first mortgage proceeds. That just isn't possible in the public housing program.
We needed new housing stock, new affordable housing stock in the city of Hopewell. That was the prize. And so we were willing to go through whatever we had to go through.
We're not here because of a paycheck. We're here because we are passionate about what we do. We love this.
Be out there and develop relationships with your local governments, your mayors, your county executives, your councils. Develop relationships with people who can help you.
In this process, we have developed additional relationships or stronger relationships, stronger conversations within the city. We're starting to blend that a little bit more, that the city's goals and housing authority goals are starting to blend together more.
With the reduction of continued subsidies and capital fund monies for maintaining the portfolio nationwide, I think it's a wise choice.
To me, change is good. And hey, if it's gonna give me an upgrade, give the place a new look. I mean, people like that new look, new feel. It makes you feel good. It just was a good feel.
This is about us making long-term decisions that affect people's lives.
I would recommend it. I have recommended it on several occasions.
We're really working hard to preserve affordable housing, but we want quality affordable housing.
If you are in a position where you think that asset repositioning is for you, find the best position for you to be, talk to the right people, negotiate the best deal, and don't be afraid to move forward.
Thank you for your time. We hope that you have enjoyed hearing from these PHAs and their experiences with repositioning. If you would like to learn more about your options to preserve and improve the public housing inventory in your community, please visit the HUD Public Housing Repositioning website. There, you can find posted materials for housing authority staff, board members, and residents. You may also contact your local field office for more information. Obviously, these are important decisions. We stand ready to help you navigate the various repositioning tools to help you better address the affordable housing needs in your community.
All right, so now I think I'm on speaker, so I'm going to try and put my headset back on. All right. Bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. I'm also going to give you some additional resources, but right now we're going to talk a little bit more about Hoboken's repositioning strategy and how we're looking at things. So here are some of the questions, some hard questions that have to be asked as part of this. What are the repositioning goals of Hoboken? What repositioning options is Hoboken eligible for? What conversion programs will generate the most project rent? What are the capital needs of Hoboken's properties, and how does this impact the residents? So here are some repositioning goals that the board and the Housing Authority came up with. The first one is 1-for-1 replacement of all affordable units. So there's currently 1,154 units, not counting Fox Hill. So whatever happens, we will replace 1,154 affordable units. We're going to strive to increase the availability of low and moderate income housing to serve unmet needs in the community. We will ensure the long-term preservation of Hoboken's existing portfolio by doing a cost-benefit analysis, which is what we're going through right now. Hoboken will provide the right to return for every resident currently living at the property. Hoboken will engage residents in meaningful participation and incorporate their feedback into the decision-making. We'll engage the broader community and the city in the planning process. Have open, ongoing, frequent, and transparent communication with all stakeholders, including the residents. Hoboken will retain ownership of the land and control of the properties. And part of this process is to provide new employment and training opportunities to low and moderate income residents within the Hoboken community. The second part of that was to look at the various options and see what the difference in the potential rent is, because remember, depending on the rent, that influences the amount of money Hoboken can borrow from a lender to do the renovations. So the first program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, this is just an example of for Andrew Jackson Gardens, 598 units. Here's the current bedroom mix. Once they convert to Section 8 under RAD, here's what that HUD established contract rent is going to be in this column. If they convert under the Section 18 program, here is what the contract rent would be for each of the units. And you can see there's a big difference, right? So the RAD income is almost 10 million. And then doing all Section 18 doubles that to about $20 million. Here are the capital needs of the properties. Now these numbers are based on some capital needs studies that were done in 2020. Yep, that's right. And you can see they're pretty significant. And in fact, these numbers are probably much lower than what actually the physical needs of the properties are. But those studies came up with about $202 million worth of needs for the portfolio, which is quite substantial. How is this going to impact the residents? Well, the RAD and the Section 8, the RAD Section 18 blend compared to 100% Section 18 have different sets of resident rights that accompany the conversion. So some of the resident rights are statutory or regulatory, and they cannot be waived. Some of the rights can be voluntarily adopted by Hoboken, even though they are not a program requirement. So we're going to walk through the different resident rights and what Hoboken is planning to do. Okay, so the rental assistance demonstration program. I'm not going to spend too much time on each of these slides because I do want to get to the resident right pieces. But so RAD was actually established back in 2011. And it allows for currently for 455,000 units of public housing to actually go through the process. And as you can see over here, these are all the housing authorities that have already converted 156,000 units. Right now, there's 59,000 units currently going through the process. And there's 125,000 units who have reserved the RAD authority. And there's 113,000 units remaining available to go ahead and use this program. And up here shows you that actually there are quite a few properties that do significant amount of renovations. And so again, you are not alone in this. The key features of the RAD program are that it provides permanent affordability, which means that when the property actually converts to Section 8, Hoboken signs a use agreement, and it requires that HUD offers the Section 8 assistance and that the Housing Authority accepts into perpetuity. So actually the affordability is forever. RAD requires that Hoboken commit to taking care of the physical needs that are outlined in those studies that those numbers that I showed you. The tenant rights under RAD are very robust, and I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail in a minute. RAD requires that the Housing Authority either maintain ownership or control, or that a public or nonprofit entity remain the owner, unless we're doing tax credits, which is a way to get a bunch more money to do repairs. And it is required under RAD that the Housing Authority replace every unit with another affordable housing unit. So resident rights under RAD, the Housing Authority is required to hold specific meetings. We've already had a lot of meetings with you all, and there'll be a lot more to come through this process. There's certain notices that are required as part of a RAD conversion, and it must be published as a significant amendment to the PHA plan, which requires resident input and board approval. Right to remain or return. So when relocation is necessary, which is what we anticipate for this repositioning, every resident has a right to return to a unit in the project. No resident may be permanently and voluntarily displaced. There's no rescreening under the RAD program, so it cannot be the basis for an eviction or a loss of rental assistance. You cannot be rescreened as a result of this conversion. That includes criminal background, credit, and income. And following conversion, you have all of the residents will be protected by standard Section 8 requirements related to tenancy. Relocation must be followed by the RAD relocation and fair housing notice, which was published back in 2016. Housing Authority is required to follow the Uniform Relocation Act as part of this. The residents have the right to return, as we said. There's a bunch of relocation notices that are required. There are provisions for displacement if a resident would like to voluntarily move. No relocation activities can be completed before HUD approves the actual conversion. And the Housing Authority must maintain a very detailed log of all of the resident moves. So some of the common relocation options are and you saw some of this in the video. Actually, you can remain on site. Some housing authorities are able to do their renovations while the residents remain on site. You can be transferred temporarily to another public housing unit while your unit is being rehabbed or rebuilt. You can transfer to other affordable housing that the PHA owns. You can, it was mentioned in the video that residents can be given a voucher to try and rent private housing in the market until their unit is finished. And then the other way to do it is to actually build a building first, and then move the residents into the building and then do kind of like a domino relocation. Residents can voluntarily decline to return to the new unit, but if they do that, it has to be informed. That means you have to have counseling. It has to be voluntary, and it has to be documented, and the resident has to actually put in writing that they are giving up their right to return. So as part of the redevelopment of Hoboken, we're going to be applying for what's called low-income housing tax credits. It's a way to get a whole bunch of millions and millions of dollars from the federal government without having to pay it back. But that comes with some really strict compliance, and the residents will have, although you're not required to be rescreened as part of RAD in Section 8, in order to get a tax credit, residents will need to be screened for the income. It has to be a certain income eligibility. There'll be ways for if a resident doesn't meet the income requirements, then there's ways to work around that. Either, I don't need to go into detail, but we can find other housing options, or that unit is not a tax credit unit. Post-conversion, residents, it remains affordable, so you continue to pay 30% of your adjusted income towards rent, just like you do now. Sometimes there are what we call, what's the word? When you pay more, I can't believe I'm having like a moment here. Who are the folks that pay more than 30%?
Ceiling renters.
Ceiling
Flat rent.
renters.
Flat rent.
Flat rent, thank you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot that. So some residents pay what we call ceiling rent or a flat rent. In that case, you might have a slight rent increase because you'll be required to pay 30% of your income like everybody else. But under RAD, you can, that increase can be phased in over 3 to 5 years. And then Section 3 is a requirement under RAD. So the Housing Authority and its partners will work with residents to get some, to do some hiring and some training as part of the whole redevelopment of Hoboken Housing Authority's public housing. Resident procedural rights. So as part of the conversion, all the residents will sign a new Section 8 lease, and RAD requires that the grievance and termination procedures from the public housing program be brought over as part of the new lease for your Section 8. And Hoboken is also required to fund resident organization rights, $25 per unit per year for resident participation funding. Choice mobility, we talked about this earlier on. That's a big part of RAD, which is, remember, after you've signed that Section 8 lease and you've been living at the property for 12 months, If you would like to request a mobile voucher, you can go to the Section 8 office and put your name on the top of the wait list for the next available voucher. So RAD has a robust set of resident rights, although the rents for the RAD program are much lower than the Section 18 program, which doesn't allow as much rehab to be done. So we're going to look at the Section 18 program, which does provide those much higher rents that will allow for demolition and new construction, and compare the two and the rights under those. And then we'll take a look at what the Hoboken Housing Authority is going to promise as part of their resident rights. So the other program we saw is Section 18 Demo Dispo. You saw that a lot of the housing authorities in that video we saw use the Section 18 program. It's just another way to remove that restrictive declaration of trust from the property so the housing authority can leverage debt. It's processed through a different office at HUD. The housing authority receives tenant protection vouchers, so a form of subsidy for all the units that were occupied in the last 24 months. And then to preserve the property, the housing authority takes that tenant protection voucher funding and project bases it back on the units. And that's a way to preserve it for the long term. So again, the Hoboken Housing Authority intends to use Section 18 as a preservation tool. And that means it will take the tenant protection voucher funding and project base it on the units to make them affordable for the long term. Other housing authorities do use Section 18 in instances where the project is located in a very undesirable location, or the residents are in danger. Maybe there's structural damage, or there's too much density. So the Duncan projects is an example of that. That project was in a severe state of disrepair. There were vacant buildings, and it was really, really dense, a lot of crime. So they did go through the Section 18 program and gave the residents vouchers so that they could move to other locations. They did not take those vouchers and project base them as a preservation tool, which is what Hoboken's going to do. So there are two ways to do Section 18. One is to prove obsolescence, which means the property, the building that you're living in is beyond its useful life. I think most of you would argue that the main campus is, those buildings are probably beyond their useful life and should be replaced. And also you can use Section 18 as this RAD Section 18 blend that a bunch of those folks in the video talked about. Proving obsolescence is kind of a challenge. It's not as easy as doing RADs, that's for sure. So the housing authority would have to have a very special kind of physical needs study done that demonstrates that basically the physical issues of the building cannot be corrected in a cost-effective manner like they can under RAD. You don't really need to know the details, but there's a certain threshold that has to be passed to prove to HUD that your project meets obsolescence. So under Section 18, all residents have to be offered comparable housing. That can include a tenant-based voucher, a project-based voucher, which is what Hoboken's going to do, or a unit operated at a comparable rental rate. Hoboken is committed to every resident's right to return to a unit in the original project, and you won't pay more than 30% of your income towards rent. Some of the resident relocation protections are very similar to RAD. So if you're relocated both in RAD and Section 18, the Housing Authority is going to pay the cost for all of that moving expenses and will help you to move. Residents with disabilities have to be offered reasonable accommodations. And obviously we can't demolish the buildings unless you've been relocated. And that you will receive a 90-day notice of relocation before you actually need to move. So here is a summary of the resident rights in the different programs and what Hoboken will be adopting. So under the RAD program, it is required that the resident have the right to return to the same, not to the same unit, but to the same project that it originally started in. Under Section 19, that is actually not a requirement, which is what happened at Duncan. But Hoboken and the board is adopting the right to return for all residents as part of its redevelopment plan. The rent phase-in is part of RAD. It is a requirement under RAD, but it is actually not allowed under the Section 18 program. Therefore, Hoboken can't adopt the rent phase-in for any of those flat renters. Under RAD, there are protections for families who are over income and overhoused. Under RAD, if you're over income or overhoused, that's okay. You can stay at the property under both of those circumstances. Under Section 18, if a family is over income, the Housing Authority has to find them right-sized housing. And if they are if they're over income and they don't qualify for the Section 18 program, then the Housing Authority could offer them comparable housing somewhere else. But Hoboken is adopting the right to return again for all families, whether you're over income or overhoused, everyone will have the right to return. Resident procedural rights are a requirement of RAD. They are not a requirement of Section 18, but Hoboken will adopt the resident procedural rights. Resident participation and funding is not required under Section 18, but it is under RAD. Hoboken will adopt the resident participation and funding requirements. Choice mobility, which is where you can request a voucher to move, is required under RAD and Section 18, and therefore Hoboken will also adopt that. And the last one actually doesn't apply because currently Hoboken doesn't offer the FSS Ross and Jobs Plus programs. So we're going to skip right over that one. Okay, so here is a list of resources that are available to you, the residents. And I'm just going to show you an example of some of the things that you can look at. Under the public housing repositioning website, and we'll just all of this will be posted on Hoboken's website so that you'll have access to it, including this whole training. So there's a lot of educational stuff that was mentioned. Greg Byrne from HUD mentioned it in the video. This is all the things that he was talking about. There's actually a whole site, a whole web page devoted to how does RAD impact me, the resident. Let's see if it pops up here. Yep. This is HUD's website. So you can actually hop on here and see that there's a new video for residents about the RAD process and resident engagement, and there's a whole lot more under here for you all as resources. What else would be? There's actually a RAD complaint process. HUD wants to know if residents have complaints about the process, and this explains how that works. There's also some photo essays, and this really has to do with other housing authorities who have gone through the process. So I encourage you to take a look at all of these resources. Okay, so what I wanted to do was just talk a little bit very briefly about the Duncan projects. And really what Hoboken wants to do is to establish a level of trust between the residents and the board and the housing authority, so that residents are not fearful that the same thing will happen to you all that happened at the Duncan projects. And basically, the difference between the two is the Duncan projects started the redevelopment process back in 2009, I believe, or 2008 or 2009 was the first phases of that redevelopment. And the program, the rental assistance demonstration program, which we've talked a lot about tonight, didn't even exist when they started. They were using a program called Hope 6. And the Hope 6 program had some really good parts of it. And it had some parts that we've learned a lot about, which is why HUD came out with the rental assistance demonstration program. It tries to correct a lot of the things that went wrong as part of Hope 6. Now, Hope 6 did a lot of great things, and a lot of really horrible public housing properties were redeveloped and made much better. But it didn't require that all of the residents had the right to return. So that was a big problem with Hope 6. And so when I looked at the Duncan projects, they look really nice, and they did replace, I think probably 1/4 of the public housing units that were originally there, maybe a little bit more than that. I think there were 400, maybe half of the public housing units that were originally there. They also put in some market rate units and some straight tax credit units as well. And so the end product is really great for the folks that live there. They've got great set of resident services. They've got all kinds of amenities. But it is true that about half of the residents did not come back to the original project. So having said that, we, HUD, Enterprise, Housing Authority, and the Board of Directors wants you all to know and to understand that you, no matter what happens, every resident of Hoboken Housing Authority who's living there when the project converts to Section 8 will have the right to come back to either a substantially renovated unit or a brand new unit. So that's what I'm going to say about the Duncan projects, because I owed that. The RAB wanted me to talk about that. So that's why I did that. All right. So now is the point where we're going to open it up to comments and questions. It's about 7:20 right now. Lourdes, how long were we going to, or Mark, how long were we going to meet for?
Well, I think if we can give a solid half hour to questions or so, I think we'll be fine. But
Okay.
if we need to go that long, but I want to make sure we really respond to the things that folks have to ask for. And we've already got a number of them up in the chat room.
Okay. So how do we want to work this? What makes the most sense? I'm not going to look, someone else can see the questions. Mark, do you want to read them off, or Christina, do you
Sure.
want to read them off, and we'll try and answer them?
Yeah, and I think we can. I think
And if we can't, I just want to put in the caveat that if for some reason it's a question that we can't answer, we'll get you the answer.
yeah, we sure will. But I think we can answer most of these pretty well. I think just off of the top, I want to reiterate that we're on a Zoom platform tonight because of COVID. We have, I think, nationally and certainly locally have seen the results of this latest surge of COVID infections going around, and we'd like nothing more than to meet in person, but we thought it was really, really important that we don't aid the spread of this new COVID variant right now. So as much as we hate it, it's legal and it's I think the right thing to do. Now we are recording this and it will be up on our website for everyone to come back and take a look at. So that's really important. We do have a question from somebody that's a resident of 221 Jackson. And are they going to get that clean and decent living for the seniors? That building has its issues. And the answer is yes. The elderly and disabled properties that we have are part of this process. And we are going to be doing renovation, redevelopment at each and every one of our properties. Now, that doesn't mean that each and every one of our properties is going to be knocked down. It does not mean that. There's, I think, a high likelihood that 221, 220, and of course Fox Hill is already converted, but it doesn't mean we're done working at Fox Hill, and it doesn't mean that we won't circle back to Fox Hill. But our elderly and disabled buildings are certainly part of this process. And I want to assure everyone that, we tend to talk a lot about the main campus and Christopher Columbus Gardens, but we are spending a lot of time as well figuring out how to make the elderly and disabled units part of this process. And they're certainly going to be. So I'm going to go right on down the comments list. I do know somebody has a comment here about how it should have been in person, but again, we know some people don't have a computer or Zoom. We're going to be continuing to come back and talk to folks as COVID leaves too. We'll resume in-person meetings, and I hope folks can help each other. If we know of somebody that couldn't be on tonight, I'd be glad to send a staff member over with a laptop so they can watch this whole proceeding here. And I hope residents and neighbors to neighbors can do that as well, because we don't want to exclude anyone, and we want everyone to be part of the process. So we've got a message that wants to hear what the plan, if this redevelopment is going to try to get us out and put people with money in it. And do this and not to kick us out. I think you've heard tonight, and I'll just keep repeating that is not what this is about. I think a lot of folks have Duncan on their mind, and yes, things happen there that will not happen here. I think I can honestly and emphatically say that our board will not allow that to happen. And I'll emphatically say that I will not allow that to happen. And HUD will not allow that to happen. Things have changed since that old Hope 6 funding that Shannon mentioned. There are much more resident protections coming directly from HUD. And there is a strong commitment by each and every one of my board members, as well as myself and my staff, that is not what's going to happen. We are going to have everyone that is a Hoboken Housing Authority resident have the right to return, per-return page. And that comes from the guiding principles that our board has adopted, and we will continue to push that, and we'll continue to guarantee that. Somebody's in a handicapped resident with a 2-bedroom. Somebody needs an upsize on that. We'll be glad to, I'll be glad to talk to you offline, ma'am. I see Julia Miller has done that. Please, I'll look for your number, and I will reach out to you on what your situation is, because you're an existing tenant that apparently needs some more space. 220 Adams, somebody needs a parking space. The same thing, if you will reach out, and either of you, if we reach out to your manager and have them directly contact me, we'll set up a call with you and talk about your situation. In one situation, a need for a 2-bedroom, and another situation, a need for a parking space. There is a comment which I think is a good comment. Most of Hoboken's housing dates back to the 1880s. Are you serious? 50 years is too old. I guess it's too old only when you want to get rid of the undesirables. I'll take the second half first. We're not getting rid of anyone. Everyone has a right to return page. The first part is buildings going back to the 1880s. We have specific issues and challenges with our buildings, and each one's going to be evaluated individually. But we, for example, have 10-story buildings with one elevator. That's just not a good situation. We need to be in a position to have buildings that are safe and secure. A 10-story building needs 2 elevators. That elevator goes down and people are having to walk down 6 stories. It's just not right. Our infrastructure on these buildings just were not designed to last for 100 years. There's serious infrastructure issues with our buildings. Many of you that live with us have experienced those. We've got waste stacks that are busting at the seams. We've got supply lines that are having pinhole leaks. The infrastructure is a huge issue and an expensive issue. And a decision has to be made on each of those on will it cost vastly more money to renovate? Is it possible to add another elevator? Is it possible to renovate that infrastructure? Or is it just more feasible to take down the building and replace it with some good, sturdy, for example, block and plank concrete, rather than, and wood, by the way, wood framing isn't the only option out there. There are other options for buildings that we're looking at that are beyond stick built, as they say, and come back with good buildings that are going to preserve our housing for the next 50 years. Because one thing I think we do know, if we don't do something on our buildings, if we don't have a substantial renovation, redevelopment on our buildings, they're not going to be here 50 years from now. And we need to protect our housing stock for the future generations, as well as the folks that are living with us now. It's just our clear #1 mission. We need to preserve this housing in Hoboken. Hoboken is becoming an area that is almost unaffordable if you're not very rich. And that is not something we can allow. We need to protect our housing and redevelop our housing. Yes, it will be available online. Another question, somebody asked the total number of apartments in Fox Hill. I think it's 200 over at Fox Hill. And yes, the other senior buildings will be addressed. And here's a comment about the brick. Again, brick doesn't necessarily last forever, but the infrastructure is really difficult on those buildings, and they were designed in many ways poorly. Those of you that live in those buildings know the ventilation issues and some other issues that they have. Yes, we are going to be doing 1-bedrooms. The elderly and disabled are included here. This isn't just for families. Well, we consider elderly and disabled families as well, but this is for everyone, every unit size. Yes, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, 3-bedrooms, up to our larger 5-bedroom sizes for sure. Our buildings from the outside may not look like they're obsolete, but the question is, what is it going to take to stabilize them for the future, so our children and our children's children can have them. So HUD's in the picture now. We've got, somebody's asking me if HUD is out of the picture. No, HUD is absolutely in the picture, and HUD will be a guiding principle looking over us as this whole process goes along. At Fox Hill, on the renovation we did, there are no units there that are market rent. They are all for low and moderate income. The question is, how many at Fox Hill are market rent? The answer is 0. Let's see, the question is, what is being referred to when you mention that the project will address some of Hoboken's unmet needs? I'm not too sure I understand that question.
I think that was once we replaced the 1154 it would be a long-term goal for Hoboken to also provide additional housing to meet the unmet needs of the rest of the community.
Thank you, Shannon. I believe that we have a huge need in Hoboken for low and moderate income units. Our current housing stock is great. We're going to preserve it, period, term, page. We're going to have you residents back into those units. But also, if we've got that opportunity as we redevelop, could we add some more units? Could some more units for the low and moderate income populations come in? You know, as many of you know, we opened up our waiting lists recently, and we had more than 4,000 applications for housing, almost 5,000, and we had about a similar number for Fox Hill. There's a great need out there, so if we can possibly, we would like to. Yeah, and somebody made the comment of not just Duncan, but Montgomery, the other projects in Newark, North Carolina, et cetera, correct. We're not following their pattern. This is a different pattern. And we're not about to go down that same road. I think HUD has learned from their mistakes, and we certainly looked at them as we've gone through. Again, yes, 1 bedrooms is part of it. The residents of all the other housing projects were promised they would not be evicted also. We are making our commitment to you that there is a right to return. Someone's asking here about when will the projects be knocked down, and they've got health reasons. They live in the senior building. Again, there's no guarantee that, particularly, especially the senior buildings, will be raised. However, the timeline's tough to answer right now. We expect to have our plan out, we hope, in March. And then we look for financing and start to move forward with first phases. This is going to be a phased-in project over a number of years. Right now, we're stable, and folks are where they are. We will have plenty of notice when we take a look at that first phase. Right now, in our first phase, we're contemplating building a new building first, so no one has to move before a new building is built, and then existing residents can move into that new building safely and securely, and we're going down that road. So we're not looking at relocate anybody off-site at this point. So that's where we are. We want to have protection for each and every one of our residents, you know. Question, will the right to return be sincere? Of course you're concerned. We understand that. We certainly understand that. And again, like Ms. Shannon said, we are looking to build your trust. And we have got HUD on the line tonight. We've got our partners on the line. We're being very public. Our board has passed guiding principles that they've committed to protecting your rights out there. And we will do everything we can to make sure that we live up to that. That is within our power. Number one, we can do that. Number two, as Ms. Shannon mentioned, there are regulatory requirements now that are different from back during the time of Hope 6 that protect resident rights. And we will make sure those are adopted and move forward. So that's the end of what I see as the questions. I hope I wasn't too quick on that, but I just wanted to address stuff that came up from the residents. I'll also be glad to sit down with any of you, and I think our team would be as well, on a 1-by-1 or a group basis or smaller Zooms. There's nothing that we feel, and I feel as the leader of this organization, that's more important than to communicate with you and answer your concerns at this point. From the beginning of this, and I'll close with this, from the beginning of this, we've talked about resident engagement, stakeholder engagement. We continue to come back to you, and we will continue to come back to you. We expect in the next month or so, 2 months, to have a draft plan, and we will be back to you with the draft plan soon. You know, that may be February, beginning of March, but it won't be that long. that we will start having a in writing draft plan back to you that you can take a look at with us and provide comments and issues like that. I would like to tell you about the survey we have, but I want to stop there because those are the chat comments that I see so far. So from the team that's on with us, anyone want to clarify, you know, on where we
Director,
are from there?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
We
Yes.
have 3 people who raised their hand right in the middle of the
Good.
presentation that Shannon had. We have Erica, Lisa Smith, and we have someone with a AOL.com. There's a 4th chat with a telephone number.
So how do we get to them?
Yeah,
how do we do?
yeah. Angel will start allowing. We'll go down the line, Angel, with Erica first, please.
Oh yeah, now I see it. Okay.
I don't see Erica anymore. Oh,
Okay, so Lisa Smith now. Okay.
she's mute.
Hi, Commissioner, can you unmute yourself?
I actually don't have a question, sorry.
Okay, saw your hand raised. I thought we had a question. All right, next.
Probably from another Zoom, sorry.
Okay.
We have Lisa Smith. She's mute right now.
Got it.
Hello?
Hello, Ms. Smith.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Mark Recco?
Good to see you, ma'am.
Good to see you too. I was questioning, what is them bulldozer out there? Because I walk past and I be seeing them bulldozers. I don't know if y'all making a parking lot.
I think maybe that's to put salt into the trucks.
Oh yeah, I seen quite a few of them right there, like right there where the laundromat at, and one over there by the back of the small buildings.
Yeah, I don't know of any other project we do. We do have an exterior project going on, but it's probably a wintertime issue. Other than that, I can take a look tomorrow and contact you.
Mark, that is the
Frank, do you
retaining
know?
wall. Yeah, that's the retaining wall and the concrete work that they're doing.
Oh, okay. I was
Retaining wall.
curious.
I'm sorry. Yep, it's fixing that retaining wall.
I mean to ask that type of question, but I was just curious.
That's fine. Good to see you.
Good to see y'all too. Happy belated New Year.
Thank you and stay healthy.
I tried.
I know you do.
Thank you for your time. That's all I had to ask.
Anytime.
You're welcome.
All right. Anybody else out there at this point?
Yep, we have 2 more.
Yes, hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm the AOL, but I'm actually Cheryl Fallick, so you know who you're speaking with. And
Can you just state your name again and spell it? This is the court reporter.
sure, it's Cheryl Fallick, first name CHERYL, last name F as in Frank, ALLICK. And
you.
I'm going to just follow up because it was one of my comments in the chat. I am wondering what kind of multi-layered sort of protection you might have. Director Recco, I have no doubt that you and the housing authority boards members that I've spoken with are sincere when you say everybody's going to have a right of return. I believe you, but I also have been around Hoboken a long time, and what I'm concerned about is the duping of people, which wouldn't necessarily come from you, because in that video I heard about, you know, interfacing between the housing authority and the city, and I'm also very familiar in another segment of the housing with the so-called voluntary leaving of a housing unit. So my concern for the residents of the housing authority is just, is there, you know, a second, third, fourth layer of protection built into what you're doing. And I would, or if not, I would just ask you to please make sure that happens here. And that's
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I think where we are now is we certainly at the start and continue to have our board committed. The next layer for us right now is that this is being watched over very carefully by HUD and the enterprise partners who are hired directly by HUD. So we not only have HUD watching over, but we've got a committed board. And if we think of other protections that can be thought of, we'll certainly implement them because we don't want to see anything go astray 2 years from now, 4 years from now. And I appreciate your concern, ma'am, and please feel free if you've got ideas to reach out to me directly. We'd love to implement anything that we can kind of emphasize our layer of commitment with the residents. We want to make sure layers of protection are there for them.
We have a phone number 201-466-6628 on.
Yes, hi, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy
This
New
is
Year.
Sherry Shahad.
Hey, Sherry.
Hi.
Could you just spell your name, please, for me? This is the court reporter.
Okay, SHERRIE, SHAHAT. Okay, I think I've asked this question before, but through this process, like at Fox Hill Gardens, we keep continually having floods, pipes breaking, and things like that. Will renovation of those kind of things be included?
Yeah, yeah. Were you done, Sherry? I don't want to.
Yeah, because I mean, they come in, they fix it, and the next day, you know how you play musical chairs, there's another one.
Yeah.
And the apartments that they're fixing, everybody's saying very beautiful. And it'd be a shame just to be flooded out and, you know, your property flooded out and the walls are stained after it's renovated.
Yeah,
So
Sherry,
it
we
needs to be serious.
Yeah, we agree with you. And you know, the first phase of the renovation at Fox Hill has just been bid. And was approved by the board, I believe, this past month. So the contractor hasn't gotten started yet on doing the work we're going to be doing under the RAD program. I don't know if you know, we had to throw out the first round of bids and we had to rebid it. So they're coming. The second thing that I want to say to you is that what I mentioned earlier, that we haven't excluded Fox Hill for future rounds of more work. That I think you're going to like what you see when we do start working soon, because it's bid already over at Fox Hill. But we haven't excluded Fox Hill for the thought of a second round of financing over at Fox Hill too, Sherry. So we will continue to work with you and we'll continue to meet with you. And I think once you see the kind of the first phase that we're going to be starting and completing this spring, I think we're going to be talking seriously about what else is needed at Fox Hill for the future.
Okay, I don't know if they were aware of this problem is going through years and it's constant, and they're aware of how much trouble it is with the leaking and the pipe breaking. You know, if they're aware there's a major problem or something here.
Yeah, our buildings definitely need upfits across the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
That's it for now.
A question came in through the chat.
You want to read it out, Shannon? I turned off my
Sure.
chat for a second.
Yes. What will be the units renovations expected? Plumbing, flooring, et cetera, et cetera.
I think the answer is yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on, Shannon.
I was just going to say at the very least, the units will be substantially renovated, which means new kitchens, new baths, new systems, or a brand new unit. demo new construction.
And that's one of the things as an administrator currently, and referring back to the early part of Shannon's presentation, is we have been choked off by HUD for many years. Our funding levels have continued to decrease, and our infrastructure issues here in Hoboken are immense. As Sherry just mentioned, your waste lines, your supply lines, your electrical lines, for those of you that are in buildings that are constantly losing electrical power during the summer because our electrical systems can't handle the air conditioning load. They were designed 60 years ago where people didn't use, or 70 years ago, where people didn't use AC. They need a redesign. They need an infrastructure design. That stuff's very expensive. But yes, it needs to be done. If you're talking about floors, you're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about all of that, it's absolutely important. Well,
Here's another one. Once the draft plan is completed, how much time do we have to accept or to decline?
well, we'll have a period of public comment on it. I mean, when we publish a plan, we always have a period that it's out there. And from this seat, whether it's 30 days or 60 days, I'm not sure, but we will certainly be out there publicly. We'll be having meetings, going over that plan with the public, with our stakeholders, with the residents, and asking you what you think about it. But at some point soon, it needs to move. So it's not going to be like a 2-year period of review. It's going to be a perfunctory period of review, but it'll be enough. It's not going to be like 2 days, 3 days, anything like that. It'll be a period where you have a chance to read over the plan and give us your comments.
That's it.
I would really like
Oh,
to
there's
thank
the,
our partners. Yeah, go on.
oh, I think it's just the same hand that was up before.
I'd really like to thank our partners with us over the next day. I think tomorrow you're going to see something go up on our website for a resident survey, which will be our next opportunity to give your resident feedback. So I hope you will all jump on to the survey so you can give your feedback. I could, if you would like, real quickly give you an example of the survey right now. Can you see this resident survey up on your screens right now?
Yes.
Yes. So tomorrow there'll be a link on our webpage and we'll have flyers out. I'd like to give a special thank you to Commissioner Reyes for working so hard on this. So we're going to have a resident survey that gets published tomorrow. There will be a Q code that you can jump on your phone real quickly with it, or you'll be able to get it through our website. So please, you and encourage your neighbors to fill out our resident survey. It's got questions such as what you would like to, would you like to see properties look the same as other Hoboken neighborhoods? What amenities on the main campus would you like to see? List amenities that you would want to see. Would you like to see more affordable apartments included than we have now? We discussed that earlier. On-campus services that you would like to see. A question that if you were given a mobile Section 8 voucher, would you be interested in moving outside of public housing in Hoboken or to another city? We'd like to know that. Are people out there that are interested? Would you like to see our housing stock be more dispersed through Hoboken? We'd like to know your opinion on those things. What type of recreational programs? Enough programming for seniors? What other senior programs you'd like to see? Programming for children, what you would like to see on that. And for youth. And do you currently use the services that we have available? So this has areas that you could put in your comments and give your answers to. And as this grows, we will be sharing these responses with you. So we look forward to as many folks as possible being able to get onto our survey starting tomorrow and give us that feedback. So we look forward to having you give your feedback, and we will evaluate and make it as much as part of our plan as possible. So thank you for that. And that was kind of what I had to say. Yep. This presentation will be online, just to repeat. This, you can look forward, I think, by the end of the week, if not tomorrow, that this whole video will be put up online. Lourdes and Angel, when do you think we can have this up on the website? How long does that take?
Approximately 1 hour after we finish it.
Okay, so we'll have it up tomorrow. So if you've got friends and neighbors that couldn't be here tonight, please encourage them. And I'll make sure that this gets front and center as soon as you get onto our webpage, that you can have a link to taking a look at this entire presentation, relook at it. And I think it's going to be particularly valuable for you to look at those links that Ms. Shannon showed us, because the HUD website for residents is just chock full of links and chock full of materials that don't cover things up. They talk about the challenges, they talk about what we're doing, and they'll talk about what happened in other communities. And because we want you to know that we're serious about this, we want to do this right. We don't want this, just crucial that we don't fail, and because we want to provide solid, equitable housing for Hoboken for the next 50 years.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And hopefully the next time we do this, it'll be in person.
Yes. Yes. Let's beat COVID. Thank you.
Yeah, beat COVID. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks to everybody. We really appreciate your being here. Take care now. Be well.